I wanted to give my first impression of my new Can Am Spyder F3T. So when I first bought it, it had like exactly 1 mile on it. And right now I've got around 76.9. So I've ridden it about 76 miles. Way more comfortable than my dual sport, of course, obviously. I had to adjust a little bit when it came to turns. You read all the reviews and you hear all the YouTubers and all the people who have test driven these, they'll say, you know, something about it drives like a snowmobile or like a four-wheeler. Well, they're absolutely 100% correct. It is a beast of a machine. As far as you sit on it, you feel comfortable, you feel incredibly stable, but when you go to turns, it is not like a motorcycle. With a motorcycle, you're able to kind of lean into the different turns. You feel like your body kind of has a little bit more control because you're in sync with the bike when it comes to turns. But with the Can-Am, it's got a massive front and it's very, very wide. And so when you go to turn it, you kind of have to manhandle the steering wheel a little bit to do that. Or flip the camera around so you can kind of see, you know, I'm straddling it here, and I think it's around 60 inches wide or something. It's pretty wide. So when you go to turn it, you've got to really turn using your core and your upper strength body to turn it. So the leaning is not going to help, at least from what I have found so far. So I live in the mountains, and with the mountains, of course, there's lots of elevation changes, but there's also a lot of curves that you have to kind of navigate, which makes it a little bit of a challenge when it comes to trying to steer the Can-Am and you're trying to manhandle the bars a little bit. There could be a trick to it. I have not figured it out just yet, but it was still fun. I just had to really slow down in the curves, so I could not take it like I would on my dual sport bike. And obviously this is a street bike, but since I live on a dirt road personally, and we're in the mountains, and so there's a lot of dirt roads in the mountains, sometimes you're going to get roads that are not well maintained. A lot of times you're going to get roads that are not well maintained, and you're going to, you know, run into roads that have periods of some dirt roads and then some paved roads all on the same stretch. It'll just kind of go back and forth depending on how the county has maintained it up at that point. And so I was going down a road that I wasn't familiar with, and it wasn't even really a pothole. It was just kind of where the road had settled, and it was a little bit sunken, and it felt like the whole Can-Am, the Spyder, just kind of went cha-chong and just kind of sunk into it. It felt like I hit a pothole, you know, like at 100 miles an hour. It did not do well at all with that. Shortly afterwards, I got a sensor light that kind of popped up. And at the time, I didn't know what the sensor light was for, so I immediately pulled over. I pulled out my little manual and started looking at the manual, and it just said, there's an indicator light, take it to the nearest dealership. Well, I'm out in the middle of nowhere, and the nearest dealership's like 2 hours away from my house, and so that was not the ideal option. So I kept researching it, finally got it back to my house, got into Wi-Fi zone, pulled up YouTube and pulled up a couple of forums, and realized that does kind of happen sometimes. And there was a really easy way of overriding some of those codes. And so basically what happened is that, you know, when I hit it, the sensor got triggered, and the Spyder did not like that at all. So I read on a forum that said that when you first turn on the bike, right when the screen is like black before it goes through the whole cycle of Can-Am, you can actually hit the mode button, and they called it the set button, but it's the little joystick when you just kind of press it in. But if you hit the mode and then press in the center of that joystick at the same time, it will clear the code. So I cleared the code, let it, you know, turned it off for a couple of minutes just to make sure everything reset, turned it back on, went about my way, went on another path, made sure to avoid any kind of holes whatsoever, and it never came back on. So I think that was an easy fix, and there doesn't seem to be any other issues. So far, I am absolutely loving the Spyder. Rode it for a couple of hours, and I put like 76 miles on it. Probably would have made it to a full 100 if I hadn't pulled over for that length of time trying to figure out what that indicator light was for. I would have probably driven it even longer today, except for one, my Can-Am didn't come with a lumbar support on the driver's seat. That's an aftermarket thing that you can purchase. I think it is going to be the next purchase that I get for this bike, because after a few hours, even though the seat's very comfortable, especially compared to other bikes that I've been on, it's still, your back takes a beating with it. And it's just hot. I mean, I live in the South. It is hot here. I'll spin it around and you can look at my temperature gauge. I am sitting in the shade and it is still showing 91 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's in the shade. But all in all, I am loving this bike. It is best purchase that I could have possibly bought and spent money on myself. So as women, we get very prone, I think, for most of us, that we're kind of in the save, or we need to put everything we have towards our families, towards our house, towards our kids. And very seldom do we actually do anything for ourselves. And you know, my husband and I, we experienced a few friends and acquaintances that passed away here recently, very, very young, in their 50s. And we realized that tomorrow is truly promised to no one. So we decided to go ahead and make some of these big purchases that's just kind of spoiling ourselves, you know, as we're approaching our midlife years. Still working, but we've worked our entire lives, and both of us have worked 2 jobs and sometimes 3 jobs at one time for, you know, decades. And so I feel like this was deserved, and I am thoroughly enjoying it. And for anybody else who may be in a similar situation, ladies, I would say embrace it. This bike is so easy and so intuitive to ride. It feels more like riding a 4-wheeler, or a car even, you know. I haven't ridden a snowmobile, ridden a Sea-Doo once, and it was very similar to that. But I say that if you're even thinking about it, go for it. It's so much fun. It makes you feel like you're a total baddie. And it's good to do something for yourselves. And so don't feel guilty about it at all. And I would love to see more women just take control of this and become more empowered, and see a great movement with women on these triker bikes. And together, maybe we could start the next generation of triker babes.